Hello and welcome to lesson 37 of the Learning Guitar series. In this particular lesson we're going to discuss the Phrygian mode, and we're looking at the third degree of a major scale and what we can derive out of it, obviously. Let's delve straight into it and let's look at some of the theory involved. So let me write down, since we've done everything in the key of G so far, let's keep doing that. This is a simple G Ionian scale, and again, if we look at the number, we know that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At the moment now we're looking at the third degree of the scale, so let's start our scale from here: C, D, E, F sharp, F sharps, G and A. Okay, so this is what we can, we call a Phrygian scale. And the reason we call it that is because if I look at the intervals relative to B, this is a 1. The interval in between B and C is a flat 2. The interval in between B and D is a flat 3. The interval in between B and E is a 4th. The interval in between B and F sharp is a 5th. The interval in between B and G is a flat 6. And the interval in between B and A is a flat 7. So these are, what we're looking here, are the numbers of a Phrygian scale. If I was to take these numbers, actually, let's do that. I'll copy them. I'll copy them here. And now I'm going to write in the key of G, but I'm going to follow these intervals. So I have G, flat 2 for G is A flat. The flat 3 for G is B flat. The 4th for G is C. We know that. As you can see, even here, the 4th, it was still C. Then we're looking at the 5th, which is D. Now we're looking at the flat 6, and that's E flat. And then we're looking at the flat 7, which is F. F. So this, let me highlight it again. Oops. This is G Phrygian, while this was G Ionian. And I think you can see that, the difference is obvious. Not only is obvious in terms of scale, the notes itself, but the intervals. What's important for us to know is the intervals, because then we can apply it to every key. So an Ionian scale we know is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A Phrygian scale is 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. And that's the horizontal structure. Now let's look at the vertical structure, which again is going to be the same note as we know. But so if I have 1, again, skip a note, so flat 3, like we've always done when it comes to arpeggios. Skip the 4th, now you have the 5th. Skip this flat 6, now you have the flat 7. Skip the flat 7, so skip the 1, now you have the flat 2, but obviously because we are in the second octave, that's called the flat 9. Skip 4, second octave, it's in 11. Flat 6, we call it flat 13, because it's an octave higher. And again, if I look at the notes, now I have G, B flat, D, F, A flat, C, and E flat in the key of G, obviously, right? And so this way we have derived both the vertical structure and the horizontal structure for a Phrygian scale. Let me actually use the same colors so it doesn't get confusing. There you go. This should do. So we have the scale and the arpeggio. Now, one thing we should notice straight away, that the first part, this is a minor arpeggio is a minor chord. As you will see, our Phrygian chord number 3 is, and we studied this previously anyway, chord number 3 is a minor chord. But in case you had any doubt, the fact that there is a 1, flat 3, 5 tells you, okay, that's minor. This scale applies to minor. So I have a G minor, I can play this particular scale on top of it if I want to. So all the way to the flat 7 is pretty much, it does have a lot in common, everything in common, with both Dorian that we studied previously, and with Aeolian. So when it comes to the arpeggio studies, as you will see, whatever you had done until the flat 7, when you did Dorian and Aeolian, still applies to this. So in a way, it's not that you have to learn a new shape when it comes to arpeggio until the flat 7. And the reason I say that is because now the extensions, the vertical structure is telling me the extension of Phrygian scale are flat 9, 11, and 13. Now, if we compare it to, I'm going to write it here. So Dorian, without going into too much details, I'm just going to write the numbers, was 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, and 13. While Aeolian, Aeolian is 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, flat 13. Okay, so as you can see, the differences in between these 3 minor scales are in the upper structure. Until 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, it's all in common. So all the main arpeggios is gonna, you don't have to study anything new. Here the 9, and so for Dorian and Aeolian, until the 9, actually until the 11, they're in common. But as you can see with Phrygian, straight away at the flat 9, we have a difference. And that's the main difference. That's where the sound, if you think about it, that's where the sound of Phrygian lives, is in the upper structure, because, this is all in common. Just as a side note, don't forget Dorian relates to this, chord number 2. Aeolian relates to chord number 6, and of course now we're doing Phrygian. So, another thing that we can notice is that when we harmonize a major scale, so when we harmonize this, use this color, and we can derive 3 minor scales out of it. And in fact, as an exercise, you can even try that. In other words, and arpeggios, obviously. In other words, when we did Dorian, the horizontal structure was 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Okay, and that's a minor. Say if I was doing to the key of G, is a G minor as chords, G minor 7, G minor 9, because the 2 is here, G minor 11, G minor 13. Another form of minor scale, actually let's write it down in the key of G also, so that you can see the difference. So in the key of G, this would be G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F, right? Now, if I do the same in Phrygian, I have 1, as we discussed, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. And again, this applies to minor chord. And this becomes G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat, F. And if we keep going, we have a third option when it comes to major modes, and that's Aeolian, which is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. And in the key of G, the notes will be G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, and F. And again, this applies to minor chords. There is more, in other words, it's like saying, okay, I do have 3 minor scales just by harmonizing the major modes. And, we discussed, since the beginning of this particular lesson, we discussed Ionian, so chord number 1, and that was a major scale applying to major chords. Dorian, Aeolian, and Phrygian, so chord number 2, 3, and 6, which generates minor scales and minor arpeggios and minor chords. Obviously, as usual, this is 3 sides of the same coin. So if it works as a scale, it works also as an arpeggio, as a chord. And we studied chord number 4, also, which also was a major. We called it Lydian. The only difference with Ionian had a sharp 4 in it. And again, it applies to major. And ultimately, we're going to do Locrian at some point, chord number 7. And that's going to be a minor 7 flat 5 type of chord, semi-diminished. And we also did Lydian, chord number 5. So in other words, we got one more lesson and we're going to finish off major modes and we can move on to pentatonic status, melodic minor, harmonic minor modes and all that other stuff. But let's come back to Phrygian. Now, when I say, and I think this is important to understand, when I say, okay, I have 3 scales that applies to a minor chord. Now, we need to understand something. It really depends on the kind of music, how much freedom you have in terms of using one or the other. In other words, if I have, say, like a pop song, let's create a pop progression. Let's see. I can do, let's say, I will do G major, so chord number 1, A minor, chord number 2. Okay, and that's going to be the song. Okay, something like this. Now, these two chords are obviously off in the key of G, and I could fit, and because it's resolving a G, resolving chord number 1, I could just tackle this all as a big, if I was to solo this, as an Ionian scale, right? Right, something along those lines, very very melodic. Right? So, and I can think of it as Phrygian, so like, as Dorian, chord number 2. So that's the chord number 2, minor, major. And this is all in common. So like when I play, until I play an arpeggio with a flat 7, until the flat 7, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. This is not really telling me if I'm playing Dorian, Phrygian or Aeolian. If I want to sound Dorian, it's the 6 and the 9. So 9, 11 and 13, so 6, 9 and 11. It's going to make any difference in terms of sound. So this, that sound. That's resolved, that's a 9, 6, 11, major 7 for G. Now, if I can superimpose Aeolian or Phrygian, and the moment I do, I'm going to create alterations. Let me stop the backing track for a second. Now, what do I mean by that? So, an alteration in this context is basically superimposing, let's say, notes or scales that they're not the correct scale for that particular progression. What I mean is, in the case of G major, A minor, G major is Ionian, and of course A minor is Dorian. And I can use any of the two. It's going to resolve. I can solo, I can do arpeggios. If I play, when it comes to A minor, if I play A Phrygian instead of A Dorian, I need to look at the differences. In other words, let's think in these terms. This would be the correct scale. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Instead, I'm playing this one. So what are the alterations? Well, here is 1. Because this is, let's call it a wrong note, okay? Just for the moment, so like, we use layman terms to understand each other. Flat 3 is in common, 4 is in common, 5 is in common, this is not in common, 6, flat 6. So basically I'm superimposing 2 alterations. I'm alterating compared to what I'm supposed to be playing, okay? If I was to do Aeolian instead of Dorian, 1, 2, flat 3 is in common, 4, 5 is in common, flat 6 is the only one that is not. So let's go back to our sound. What does it do? I mean, of course, like, for those of you who are pursuing more jazzy type of sounds, fusion-y type of sounds. The concept of alterations is, in a way, is the bread and butter of that kind of style of music. You're not going to hear this kind of superimposition or like alterations when it comes to pop music. Whatever I played before is kind of appropriate to it. Let's see what it sounds instead, if instead of playing Aeolian, in the same progression, G major, A minor, instead of playing Aeolian, I'm going to play A Phrygian. And those two alterations, they're going to stick out because they're not supposed to be there, okay? So I'm going to use those alterations on A minor. So I'm going to use A minor Phrygian instead. And by the way, in a second, I'm going to show you the PDFs with the scales that you can download. You know, by now you should know the gist of it. And when it comes to G, I'm going to resolve it. So in a way, over these two chords, I'm going to go back and forth in between G Ionian when it resolves and A Phrygian instead of Aeolian. Let's see what it sounds like. Resolved, Phrygian. This would be Dorian. And this is Phrygian instead. I'm sure you can hear the difference, and it's kind of pokes out, but it's not bad, you know. As I said, if you are into more free kind of styles of music, jazz, fusion, some degree of R&B, or, you know, this is not, you know, it's not so out there yet, okay? There is stuff we can do in terms of alterations which would sound way more altered than this. Same thing if I use Aeolian instead. So again, for G, I'm going to use Ionian, so it resolves. And for A minor, I'm going to use Aeolian instead of Dorian. In that case, I'll only have literally one alteration, which is the flat 6 instead of the 6. Okay? Let's see what that sounds like. So I hope this makes sense in terms of understanding what I mean in terms of superimposing. The beauty of the modes, in a way, from my perspective, the way I see it, is it's in this. It's in instead of playing the scale that will go with it, playing something else and getting some alterations into it. Otherwise, in terms of modes, and that's where I guess where some of the confusion sometimes arise is in thinking, okay, why am I studying seven different scales when the notes are always the same? What I mean is G Ionian, A Dorian, B Phrygian, C Lydian, D Mixolydian, E Aeolian, and F sharp half diminished. It's all the same notes, so why am I bothering having to think one or the other? You know, I'll just run up and down an Ionian scale. And to be honest with you, that in pop music, as I suggested in previous lessons, it kind of makes sense. I mean, like, you don't have really to learn all that stuff if you don't want to. To me, I'm always of the impression that I look, even if it's a pop song, I will look at where does the song resolve. So when I look at the chord progression, does it resolve into a chord number 1? In that case, I might use Ionian. But if the progression is, say, a 2-5, in this case is resolving into chord number 2, I'd rather use Dorian. Because so like the arpeggios reference, like, is more of a photographic memory, a visual thing where the intervals are, especially when playing arpeggios. I'd rather think Dorian and think 6, 9, etc. Same thing for Phrygian, in terms of practicing its sound, is a minor chord, so we could literally loop any minor chord anywhere you want. And, you know, you can play on top of it. Actually, I'll do it, so I'll show you what I mean. Let me stop this. So I'm literally gonna have a drone. So that's like a G minor kind of drone. And you can literally, like, play the scale and get used to the sound of it. So as you can see, the arpeggios A minor 7, which is the thing I did at the end, they work the same work it would have done if this was a sound of Dorian or if this was a sound of Aeolian. So one good exercise, after spend sometimes, like now I spend like a minute, but literally use a drone or a loop. Just loop a minor chord. It doesn't have to be G minor, whatever key you want to use. And you're not practicing a chord progression, you're literally practicing that particular sound. After you're done with that, and as I said, I would probably, this lesson comes, every 3 weeks. So I probably would do it for a week just to get that Phrygian sound into your head. And probably then after that, I would start same kind of exercise, so one chord, but I would start trying to hear the differences in between, say, Dorian and Phrygian. So spend some time on Dorian, then switching to Phrygian. Still using just a loop. I'll show you what I mean. And you can move to Aeolian also. Let's start with the Phrygian. For the moment, until we finish all the modes, so as I said, we got Locrian still to go. I don't think there is still the need of saying, okay, let me practice like a sequence. Okay, this is Dorian, this is Phrygian, this is Aeolian. And the reason I say that is because we're gonna practice all 7 modes in that manner once we completed them, So in a single key, all that, so G Ionian, G Dorian, everything is starting from the same root note, let's put it that way, okay? Let's look at the PDFs that come with this lesson. So what we got here is, I wrote Phrygian mode, so here is the numbers as usual, 5 shapes. If you studied, in lesson 1 to 15, I believe, when we did Ionian, I tackled both the 5 cages and 7 if you're doing 3 notes per string. So whatever, if you understand the logic behind what I wrote here, you can easily adapt it to a 3 note per string. In blue, I highlighted the minor chord, so you can see the minor chord within the scale, okay? So here is your shape. And here is the Phrygian mode, modal arpeggio. So all the extensions, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, flat 9, 11, sorry I wrote 4, but anyway it's the same, flat 3 and 1. You will not find many more arpeggio studies. And the reason is, as I said, until the flat 7, whatever we studied in Dorian still applies. So all the exercises we did in terms of, okay, that's a minor triad, minor 7, and we did it, like 2 octaves. And of course, like when we did Dorian, I think I spent, 10 lessons just on Dorian, because there was a lot of arpeggios to study, a lot of chords and stuff. So in terms of chords and arpeggios, beside the modal arpeggio, because the modal arpeggio obviously is going to be different because it's got a flat 9 and it's got a flat 13 that either Dorian or Aeolian don't have. So in that sense, I have 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, flat 9, 11, flat 13, 1. And so that's kind of an arpeggio I want to study. That's like, this is the sound of Phrygian as an arpeggio, while this is the sound of Phrygian given this as a root note. So put it there. That's the sound of Phrygian, right? As a scale. As an arpeggio, okay? And if you look at the PDF, you have it, again, 5 shapes. Same thing when it comes to chords. I wrote a couple of pages of chords, and I wrote where you place the root note with that are not mind the name of the chord. I wrote all the 5 shapes, a few ideas. So of course, if let's take this shape for example, visually, literally take it visually, and it's basically this shape here. Okay, you have these notes. Now, the name of the chord will depend on where I put the root note. So in this case, it's A. Okay, this is A minor with a flat 13. If I do it here, it's a C sharp. I think this should explain. Sometimes people wonder why there is no fret number. Well, the guitar is a transposing instrument. So whatever you put your root note will give a name to the chord. That's, makes our life a little bit easier. As you will notice when you look into these pages, is most of these chords, they either contain a flat 6 in there, an 11, or a flat 9. What I mean is, like in these pages, you will not find minor 7 type of arpeggio chords, because again, you'll find them when we studied Dorian. I kind of put a lot of minor 7 type of chords in there. We can study like millions of chords. The important thing is to remember at least 3, if that makes any sense. So in terms of minor 7 chords, so chords that contains 1, flat 3, 5, and flat 7 in different order, or that's in common, so you can get them from Dorian studies, right? And in Dorian studies also there were chords which contained a 6 and a 9 and an 11. And that was Dorian, okay? In that case, for Aeolian, exclude all the ones that contains a 6 and start using these ones because they contain a flat 6. That's the Phrygian sound. So for example, you have chords like this. And here is your flat 6. And this is kind of a Dorian. Could have been also Aeolian because of the flat 6, but the moment I put, say, like let's put it a flat 9 in there. That's 1, 5, flat 9. And there is a minor third, so this is proper Phrygian. Here is another flat 13. Right? So in this couple of pages, you'll find several chords having root notes, say on the first string. When it's white, obviously I'm omitting it, you might find it somewhere else. But it always have other flat, it will have some notes of the upper stretcher of Phrygian. And so root note on the first string, root note on the second string, looking left of it, root note on the third string, like on the D string, like here, root note on the first string, looking left. There's several positions which you can use and learn in terms of using chords which have a specific kind of Phrygian flavor to it. In terms of practicing, again, if you want to practice more of a progression rather than stay on a chord, and again, maybe like, if you're doing 3 weeks, I think maybe it's a good idea. The first week, you spend it just on one chord, you play a minor chord, and you run your scales and your arpeggios, and you develop ideas. And by the way, when it comes to scales and arpeggios, I mean, I know I say this every lesson. Lesson 1 to 15 contains all the intervallic studies, all the group studies, triads, four notes, arpeggios, etc., which applies to scale. They don't just apply to Ionian, because we're using always the same 5 shapes and we're just displacing them, or the 7 shapes and we're displacing them. So those studies are still incredibly important. If you haven't done them, do them before you start, I put a G chord and an improvise, because, you might not have a lot of ideas. I cannot stress it enough. The scale itself is just a letter in the alphabet. It's like A, B, C, right? It's not even a word yet. The moment you start doing, say, intervallic studies, or, triad studies, etc., on all shapes, right? Now you're developing words, and again, words are not yet a sentence. And I'm sure that when you must have read somewhere, people, when they talk about guitar solo, they talk about in terms of phrases or sentences. Now, fragments of those studies automatically at some point become sentences and become phrases. So don't skip that part, right? Anyway, what was I? So maybe up to 3 weeks, you might want to spend the first week just, getting familiar with the sound of the scale of the arpeggio using a static chord, okay? And maybe the second week you start, you keep playing over one chord, but sometimes you use Phrygian, sometimes you use Dorian, and sometimes you use Aeolian. So in order to pick up the differences, as I said, it's 2 notes, 3 notes. Maybe the third week you start with the progression. So like I said before, in a way it's nice, even if it's kind of a poppy kind of tune, if you use as a reference the resolving chord, it kind of helps. So in this case, I'm going to use a simple progression, which is chord number 3 going into chord number 4, and it is resolving into chord number 3. In other words, you have, let's say in the key of G. I can have G, and I can have A flat, this triad here. And I'm gonna use it still with the bass of G, because it's actually nice. So you have this kind of sound. I hope it makes sense, and I hope I managed to explain you what's going on with Phrygian in layman terms, as they say. So hopefully it will make sense. As a third week, maybe you can use a progression like this or anything similar. It's basically chord number 3 into chord number 4, whatever the key. So say you want to do this in the key of C, chord number 3 will be E minor, chord number 4 is F. In one of the previous lessons, there is several charts which details, all the chords in all the keys when it comes to major modes and the harmonization of major modes. I think that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, or anything. If anything, I hope you find it informative. If you have any doubt or it's something you have not understood or is confusing you, feel free to drop a comment, or more than happy to help out. And as usual, thank you to the Patreon supporters. You'll find a link to my Patreon page in the video description. If you can afford it, it's nice if you can support this project. It's only $3 a month to have, and you have access, to a lot of material from previous lessons and so forth and so on. What else? I should do, all that marketing stuff that people do, but honestly, I hope you learned something out of this. The rest, subscribe to the channel. It's always appreciated. If you're enjoying the lessons, drop me a line so I know that you are. Or at least, as I said, if you're learning something. This is going to be the last lesson before Christmas and New Eve. Next lesson is going to be obviously in 3 weeks from now, so it gives you enough time to practice all this stuff. Because it's a lot. To talk about it takes half an hour. To get it into practice, I think 3 weeks is a good amount of time if if you're dedicated, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day. Anyway, enjoy a wonderful Christmas, and I wish you I wish you a fantastic year, obviously a fantastic New Year, in a way, hopefully a better one than the one we just had. If you were lucky, you had a great 2021, but if like me, you belong to the category that has been, struggling with the lockdowns and all kind of stuff like that. So again, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you next time. Bye.